All right, welcome back. So in our last video, we looked at how to build a looped visual effects element in EmberGen. And then we learned how to export that element to be used in another app. In today's case, that's going to be Adobe After Effects, but you can still import these assets into whatever app you're working with, whether that's Nuke, Fusion, Blender, you name it, it'll work. You're just importing a file sequence, and every app has really got its own way of doing that. And also in the previous tutorial, we looked at showing you how leveraging loops can save you a lot of hard drive space. So in this video, we are going to get our background plate. We're going to bring that into After Effects. We're going to start prepping our scene with a little bit of camera tracking. We're also going to import the visual effects element that we made in the last video. We've also got some smoke elements, and there's also some sparks that we've built as well. And we've got presets for you to download and play with for all of these bits. And once we've got them all into the app together, we're going to use a few techniques to sort of fuse the two together in a nice sort of visually pleasing way. Okay, so to show you how to just bring those effects into After Effects, we're going to start a new project. I've already got one open here, but I'll take you through it all the same. So find your project pane over here. It's normally over on the left-hand side. Find an empty space, right-click, import, file. I know I've already got it on my clipboard, so Control-V. I know that this is where my my file sequences are, and if you remember from the last video, we had two layers that we exported, one for the emissive layer and one for the smoke layer. I'm just going to click on emissive. They're all going to show up, they're all going to be in order. You just select the first one. Click once on that and make sure that PNG sequence is enabled here. I won't import because I've already got it imported, it's right here. And I would do the exact same for the smoke and it would show up just like this. So these are our two layers. If I double click one, it will show you the sequence. What I've also done for these, if I go for interpret footage main, make sure that I'm looping. So this is going to loop that animation 100 times. And I've also made sure that it's playing back at 60 frames a second. Once we've got them imported, we're going to turn them into their own compositions. So shift select both of them, bring them down to this little icon here and let go. And you're going to get a new composition, and it's got both layers in there. If I turn on this alpha transparency grid, we can see that, yeah, we can see through this. When it's in another composition, it's going to have a transparency to it so that we can actually put it over the top of other things and we can see through it where we need to see through it. But I'll turn on black so that we can see the fire. I've already got this made over here, and just to take you through the changes that I made, I actually copied the emissive twice just to bump up the flames a little. And also added an adjustment layer. I think I added, yeah, just a little bit of color control on there just to push it in a direction that I liked. So I've also got some other layers in here, and we've got, let's have a look at our project pane. I've actually labeled them beginning with elements, so they show up at the top. So there's the one that we made in the first video, and there's some slightly changed ones. There's one that's just a smaller amount of fire and another one that's a bigger amount of fire. There's one here that's smoke. That one doesn't actually loop, it's just a fairly long animation. And the same with the sparks here. The sparks were created in EmberGen. It's just some particles being emitted from a ground plane. And the whole deal with that is just to add it into the scene to give the composition just a little bit more motion. So all of this goes on top of our background plate. And that's this one right here, just to show you what it looks like without any changes whatsoever. So this is the video clip as it was downloaded from pexels.com. It's entirely free to use. You can download it yourselves. We'll add a link in the description. And yeah, it's just a slow camera move inside a ruined derelict building. There's a few things we're going to have to change to make this really work with the fire, because I didn't really like it being quite so bright through the windows. So we're gonna bring those down a little bit. And as we get further into the video, we're going to have all this fire inside. It's going to be quite a strong light source. So we're going to have that fire sort of interact with the scenery a little and push a little bit of light around. Cool. So to get started, what you could do is hit this button here to make a whole new composition to drop your background plate into. But then you'd need to know exactly what frame rate it's going to be, exactly what size. Easy way, grab the video file, bring it down, and it's going to make a new composition. It's going to inherit all of the properties of that video. So it's going to be the right size, the right frame rate. So in order to put these VFX elements into the scene, we need After Effects to understand that there is a camera here that is moving in 3D space. And we've got a tool called a camera tracker inside of After Effects. There we go, animation track camera. So that's going to look at points of high contrast in the footage. It's going to use a little bit of maths to figure out exactly how the camera is moving in relation to those points on the ground, on the walls. In fact, I should probably cancel that. I'm going to go advanced, detailed analysis, and then let it run. It will take a couple of minutes depending on your machine. Worth noting that you can think of this as like an unguided camera tracker. It doesn't require you to really know too much, okay? You just sort of let it do its thing and it figures out as best it can. It's gonna work best on shots where the camera movement is quite minimal or quite slow. If this camera is zooming in and out, if it's moving left and right rapidly, it's gonna lose track of what's going on and it's just gonna fail. So use a clip that's like this, or use this clip because it works really, really well with the tracker. So just to show you what's going on here, After Effects has picked out these points and it's tracked them over time. And when it's lost track of them, it's found some more points to track. And it's basically built up like a loose 3D model of what's going on here. And instead of moving the 3D model around, our camera is moving through that 3D model. So with that in mind, if we were to place something, see this little target that's showing up, and that will show up when you are sort of between 3 points. Okay, it's basically making a triangle in space. That looks like that target is kind of on the ground. You could right click and then just choose one of these options. What I tend to do is I will select a bunch and I'll have After Effects work out like an average of all of those points. I'm going to right click, I'm going to create text in the camera. So we've got a little bit of text that seems to be in 3D space. Let's select that text. And we've got After Effects' wonderfully funky 3D controls here. So let's just approximate this. I just want to know if this track has worked. Can't quite get to the scaling controls there, so I'm going to do it manually over here. There we go, scale. Lovely. And then move them around like this. So in theory, if our camera tracker has worked, then we should see that this text is kind of stuck to the floor. Let's bring it all the way back. Ignore that first frame because we've got a black first frame on our video. Hit play. And yeah, this seems pretty solid. So like the bottom is sticking to the ground there. It's not drifting too much. In essence, this is what we're going to be doing with our fire effect. So if you've never done this before, it might blow your mind a bit, but you can, of course, move this text back in the scene, move it up a bit, and then it will appear to be further back in the scene. And this is how we're going to place all of our VFX elements. So let's crack on. So then we've got our background plate. It is tracked. We've already prepared our elements. We've got them over here, and we can find them in our project pane over here. It's these guys. And then you're like, how do we actually get this into the scene? So you get your composition. Don't bring the file sequence, bring the composition. Let's just grab that one there. Going to bring it to the top of the stack and let go. And it will appear to be in the scene, but it's not in the scene in a 3D space. This at the moment is a 2D layer. And as such, it's not going to move with the camera. So if we scrub through, it's totally static, even though we know we've got a 3D track scene. So we're going to have to tell After Effects that this is a 3D object and to put it in that 3D scene. So let's go back to the beginning. And we're going to use those tracking points to tell After Effects where we're going to put this fire asset as well. So first things first, click on your element. Got this little box icon here. Click on that once. It will shift in position, but it's now a 3D object. So if you want, you can rotate this thing around, which is not really what you want to do. Control Z that. You can move and translate it, and you can move it into and out of the scene. And it will move with the camera, which is good. It's what we want. But you might have noticed that this is actually really, really small scale fire that's really close to the camera. It shouldn't be moving like that. So we are going to use our tracking points, and we're going to use some of those points to inform where this fire is going to sit in the scene. So click on your background layer, and all the points have disappeared, which is pretty frustrating with After Effects. Go to your effect controls, click on the camera tracker effect, and they all come back. Let's go for something like this. Grab this area of dots. I'm going to right click. I'm going to create a null. That's going to create a new thing in our stack here. It's invisible in the scene. We're just using it as a reference point. I'm going to hit P, find the position, and I'm going to copy it with the keyboard. Control C, copy. I'm going to go to our element here, and I'm going to go Control V. And it's going to put it in that spot at completely the wrong size. So we're going to keep the position, we're going to scale it up. If you hold Shift, is going to keep proportion. I'm going to bring kind of the bottom of the fire up to where that pink cross is. And we're just going to see what that looks like. See if it tracks in the scene as it should. That doesn't seem too bad. So when you're placing these elements in the scene, this is the art direction bit. This is where you have creative control over where things really are, okay? To me, I would say the scale of that fire maybe looks a little wrong. So I'm going to scale him back down a bit. I'm going to hold shift to keep proportion and drop him down a little bit. And see if that looks any better. Seems good to me. So now it's a case of rinsing and repeating and doing this as many times as you want, or as many times as your computer will let you, and just placing things around the scene. So at this point, I'm going to drop back quickly to the original version of this. So ignoring these glows and all the smoke, we've got a concentration of stuff on this debris here. We've got some over here, which is the one that we were just messing around with, and we've got a little bit off to the right over here. We've also got some smoke, and the smoke is in 3D space behind all the fire. So let's see if we can mirror some of that. I might push this one back just a little. Bring them up. What you kind of want to do is to put it where it kind of interacts with something that's in the scene. And it's a case of going through and making sure it looks kind of roughly right. I'm going to pull him to the right a little. Just so we can catch that corner. Cool. Right. I'm going to copy this a few times. So we've got a bunch of these now. You could Control C, Control V. Control D will just duplicate and it will make a whole new copy. So another thing we can do is, once we've got this copy, we can shift it over. What you don't want to do is to do it by eye and, say, bring them up there. It kind of matches what's in the background. But what you're really doing is getting something at this point along the floor and bringing it up into the air. So don't do that. Go back to your camera tracker effect, find the dots on the floor, select a bunch, create a null. You can delete these when you've finished using them, by the way. So that's the new null. I'm going to go P for position, copy that position, come back to our fire effect, that one there, and then Control V. So you're copy and pasting the position. I'm going to bring that fire up so it meets that pink cross there. Think of that as like the origin. And it should be scaled appropriately. So it's got the same scale as this, but it's further back in the scene. So let's see if that moves. That seems pretty good. All right, we've got a bunch set up. I want to make some that are only just in shot in the foreground, just to give it a bit more depth. So I'm going to go right back to the beginning. And we know that these guys are already placed, and these guys can be our foreground. So let's get rid of these old track nulls. We don't need them once we've copied their position and pasted it on something. Let's get the position of something relatively close to the camera, like down here. Let's grab these guys. Create a null. P for position. Copy that. Pop it on this guy. And then we're going to bring him up in Y. So this one's going to be a lot bigger than the others. It's a lot closer to the camera. I'm going to move it off to the side a bit. Maybe even off camera a little. And you will notice that they all look exactly the same at the moment. Don't worry too much about that. We're going to stagger them all so they're actually all in a different place in the loop. And then they won't look that similar. Let's just do this last one. So back to background plate. Let's say about here. Create a null. And then bring him up as well. Put him over to the side. Because I just kind of want to get some of it coming in from the side. Might even go back to this one here. There we go. Cool. Get rid of these nulls. All right, so if we play this back, they should be fairly convincingly in 3D space. Colors are all out of whack, but at least they're moving kind of appropriately. We could put a bigger concentration of fire over here. Might even just scale them up just a bit. In fact, if we pop you there, Control D, off to the side a bit, and then bring it forward, down. See how that goes. That's cool. When it comes to staggering these loops, because if you look at the moment, they're all doing the exact same thing. It's really as easy as just sort of pushing and pulling things around with regards to the layers and the timing. So you just select like the top one, figure out roughly where it is in frame. That's that one, that's cool. We are just going to move this bar to the left, and that changes like the start and end point of the loop. Or rather, not the loop, it changes the start and end point of when this clip begins playing in the composition. And we do that to the next one on. That's this one over here. We're going to move this one just a little bit further. I'm going to make sure it's displaying all the way through the comp. Next one down. Shove them along a little. You don't have to move it by a huge amount because there's so much movement in the scene with all this fire flickering around. It's going to be really hard to really pinpoint the start and end of anything or two things looking too similar. So in that final version of the scene, there's a hell of a lot more going on than just those fire assets, okay? I think a large part of compositing is making a bit of interaction happen between the original plate and the things that you're adding to it. So one of the ways that we have changed the look of the whole scene, right? Here is just our default background. In fact, it's probably got some, it's got some curves on it. So let's disable all of this stuff. This is what the base layer looks like. I've added the curves on top, and that's just introduced a bit of red light into the scene. I think I've pulled down the greens and the blues slightly. Yeah, it looks about right. It's quite subtle. There's a little bit of mocha stuff going on there, but I'll go over that later. I think there was a fast box blur. Yeah, I think because these bushes at the back were quite distracting, I just wanted to blur them out ever so slightly. There's a bit of extra hue and saturation going on. So I've introduced a bit of red, but then I've brought the overall saturation down a little. And then we've got this color link here, which is, it's an interesting effect that it's like a cheap hack that I tend to use, especially when there's fire in the scene, because we've got these VFX assets. They look great, but they don't actually interact with what's in our footage. And this is a nice, easy way to get some of the brightness and the color from that effect and have it influence everything else that's in the frame. And it's up to you how much it really influences what's in the frame. It's basically looking at layer 36, which is one of our fire elements. It's going to take an average of the brightness, and at 20% opacity, this is dialed down quite a lot. And with a soft light blending layer, it's going to pump some of that brightness and color into the frame. So if we play just this bit, you should see quite a subtle pump in brightness and color. And that's not the only one. There is a whole extra layer that this is happening on as well. That should be this one here. And this is another one. I've made a copy of the background layer, dropped it on top, added some further color adjustment, and then done the same color link thing, but I think it's pointing to a different layer. Yeah, layer 30. And this one's at 100%. So this is adding even more flickering and brightness. So I tend to use an overlay mode there because I want to influence the lighter parts of the picture. I don't want to bring the blacks up too far from where they are because they should kind of stay black. I'm actually going to highlight those areas on the floor in a slightly different way. And we can see that with these shape layers. So these guys are just flat 3D assets. If I show you one. Actually, yeah, that's a good one. So what we've got here is, although you can't see it because it's got a certain blending mode on it. If I put this to normal, we can see that it is a gradient ramp on a circle. So coming from the center point, coming out, it fades out. So it's affecting the color and the brightness that's there on the background. And it is floating around in 3D space because I've taken a 3D tracker down here, pointed this asset to that point and then brought it up so it's sticking against the wall. So it moves with the camera. And the same trick with background layers, it is taking the fire as reference and using that color link. And it's actually just pointing to a totally different bit of fire. I think it's actually pointing to the one that was closest to it. So this will actually flicker slightly differently to the rest of the scene. And there's loads of these. So if we turn them all on, you should start to see little areas of light appearing on the floor. And each of these little areas of light is looking at the fire that it's closest to. It's taking the brightness and the color, and it's just pushing that out into the floor area and pumping the brightness and the color up. And the scene starts to look really busy once you've got all of them enabled. But it really does help, because otherwise you've just got bright fire sitting on top of a dark scene. And then we've got this layer. This is another copy of the background. I'm showing you only the background and this layer here, which is a copy of it. It won't show up without the background being underneath it. So what this is, it adds these orange splotches on. And these are actually animated over time. So it's picking these up with an edge detect filter, which is just a 2D effect. It's a really cheap, easy 2D effect. And it just looks at sort of points of contrast, straight lines, things like that. It picks them out and it colors them. I've done a load of work to kind of disguise it here, but if I bring it all the way back to basics, let's turn this off. Let's turn off all the color and the blurring so you can see what I'm talking about. Mock is only there to stop it from happening in the sky. I only wanted it on the floor. So there's a mask there via Mocker, and also invert it. So this is what it's actually doing. It's picking out those bits of detail. And then what we're doing is we are adding color and brightness to those points. So first I invert it. So it gives us bright edges, which is kind of what we want. We're changing the hue and saturation. And we're sort of blurring it out a bit because we don't want it to be quite so sharp. And then the other thing we're doing is we don't want these edges to be there all the time. We kind of want them to move around, to get darker, to get brighter over time. And I did that with an animated noise layer that just blows gentle noise from right to left, I think. And then I told this layer to use that noise as a track map. So if we turn that on, you can then see that there's kind of a ripple to it. And don't forget, all of this is happening underneath the fire. So it's just about adding a bit of detail, a bit of movement, just to simulate that there's some interaction between the effect and the background plate. So by the time you've got all of those bits added to the background plate and you've got your fire on top, it kind of syncs up quite nicely. I've added a smoke layer in the background here. Yeah, most of them are going to be down the bottom of the stack because I wanted them to be at the back, kind of hiding as much as I could that back wall, so we lose a lot of the brightness. I wanted this to be sort of more nighttime. But just to show you the smoke, we solo just those. These are actually all the same effect. It's not a looped one, but it's quite a long animation. And what I did with this, I actually slowed it down a bit. I wanted the smoke to move fairly slowly compared to the fire. I don't know if it's too evident when you can't see the other stuff, but I've also done the color link trick with the smoke. So yeah, you can see it sort of popping in and out there. So this smoke is quite close to some fire. The smoke has a bit of volume, so I wanted the fire to kind of illuminate the smoke. You could do that inside of EmberGen, but I wanted to be able to do it here in compositing, so it's kind of faked, but it gives you a bit of sort of after the fact control about what's going on here. So just to show you that one more time, let's just find one of these smoke layers. So this one here, color link, source layer is 36, and that is going to be, if I click on that, it will reveal where that fire is. So 36. So that fire there is influencing that smoke layer. We've got our Ember layers as well, so they are quite high up the stack because they're mostly foreground. There's some in the background, but they're mostly foreground. Let's just solo a couple of these, and also the background layer as well. So you can see how they move in relation. So I think one of them is really close to the camera. Not that one, this one here. So yeah, they don't always look like they are, but they're actually tracking with the camera. And there's nothing exact about it. They aren't actually synced with the fire or the smoke or anything. They're just sort of something that's moving that's in there as well. So yeah, there's a bunch of different tricks going on here. For me, it's always about trying to fake that interaction between the effect and the background. And there's always a couple of different ways that you can do it. So we've got that find edges technique, and we've got the technique where we are sort of pushing a little bit of brightness and color onto the background layer. And it all really comes from getting that camera track. If you get the camera track, you can start dropping things into the scene that are going to influence that background. And the thing that always sells it for me is an adjustment layer on top, little bit of motion blur. You kind of want it to blur as if it was shot on a real camera. So pixel motion blur is good. Add a bit of overall glow. I would say maybe don't add glow to individual assets because it's not going to interact with other things around it. Put it on an adjustment layer at the top. So yeah, all in all, it's actually pretty simple to make. So you have to get that background layer that's got a nice simple camera movement. You'll bring it into After Effects and get the camera track. Once you've got that, you can just start dropping assets in. And from there, it's just a case of trying to massage stuff around and make it fit. And if you do it right, then you should have a scene that kind of looks pretty well put together. In this case, I think my supervisor would probably point something out to me. Yeah, I didn't notice until just now. I've got a hard line up here, and that is the top of the smoke. So I'd put like a soft mask and have that fade out. So when it comes to tweaks and things I'd change and things I'd advise you to watch out for, yeah, there's a couple. So we've got our background layer and our shape layers here that are influencing the lighting. That's great and everything after the fact, but you can't beat filming it in real life. I don't mean so much the fire, but if you had some spotlights where you could actually put real light on the ground and then drop in digital fire after. If you had actors in the shot, then the light would be interacting with them. That would be good. As for things to watch out for, motion blur is great. It really helps to sell the effect. But it's pretty expensive CPU or GPU wise. It's got to do a lot of thinking before it displays the result, and it's got to do that for every single frame. So if I skip forward a bit, this is already rendered here, you see by the green line. But if I jump over here, it's going to take a few seconds. And this is on a 4090. So yeah, just be aware that can take a little while. You might find that not putting this on until you're ready to export it is a good option. So if you turn it off, things just get a lot quicker. All right, there was one more thing that I discovered while I was editing the video, in fact. So after I thought I'd done everything, I found this weird error here. If you find that you are seeing these weird artifacts, in this case, this fire's got a vertical line going through it, it's because when I was showing you this, the smoke layer being lit up by the fire that's right next to it, these two things actually occupy the exact same point in space. So After Effects has no idea which one is supposed to be drawn on top of the other. And for that reason, we've got this weird polygonal clipping happening here. And that just shows us this weird line going through it. If you find that you're seeing this stuff, just make sure that these two assets are spaced slightly apart, maybe in depth, to stop After Effects from freaking out about which one to draw on top of the other. So that was a fairly brief introduction to how you would comp with loops. So just to go over it, we have learned how to create the loops in EmberGen. We've learned how to export those loops. We've learned how to bring them into After Effects and have them play back as loops as well, because that's a whole separate thing. After Effects deals with it in its own way. Nuke will do it its own way. So will Fusion and other applications as well. This is how you do it in After Effects. We've learned how to use some camera tracking to get an approximation of the camera's movement in this scene. And that's going to be different for every shot that you look at. You have to do a different track. Sometimes it works great. Sometimes it really, really doesn't. And you have to really step in and manually move things around. So we've learned how to bring these assets in and have them sit in a 3D space. We've learned a few techniques for faking interaction of light. Okay, and these are just ways that I've discovered doing this. There's probably loads of other things that you could do. But for now, that's where we're going to leave it. So if you have any questions, if you have any ideas, just reach out on Discord and check the download links below this video. So you'll have download links for the presets that we use to build these effects. So you can download those, either render them as they are or make your own changes and render your own versions. There's also a download link to the background file that we used for this video. So you can have your own shot at it. If you do, make sure you post it on social media and tag us in it so we can come and have a look at what you've made. Be really good to see. So until next time, I'll catch you in the next video.